I started to do the transcription, Sheldon.
Hmm?
I started to do the transcription of the first part.
You did?
Yeah, it's coming by nicely. I think I have your whole life memorized now.
Well, I made a few mistakes. I'm going to have to make some corrections.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because I could understand how, in 75 years you would get the sequence like, oh, yeah, right, we lived in that house before
Right,
that
yeah,
house,
I got a little bit out of order.
Yeah, I remember you moved to Long Island, to
Right.
Laurelton before
I
you
was-
actually moved to the West Bronx.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't remember that much very well,
Yeah. That's understandable.
but it was part of my parents' upward striving.
Right. To be
Yeah.
upwardly mobile.
Yeah.
Where are we going to start today, Francis? What?
Actually, there's one thing. If you move just a little bit to your right, because I think the slightest movement, I'm seeing a bit of your hair and your hands and stuff. So
Okay.
that's good.
Okay.
We're going to start sort of near the end of the 60s, I think. Right, Sheldon?
The end of the 60s,
The end
well,
of the 60s.
when I
What
bought,
about, yeah.
when I bought the house.
Yeah, okay. And tell us about, and the whole story about how you're teaching and then setting up the group and all that. I think that's all very interesting. Want to pick up there somewhere?
Right. Oh. Yeah, well, in the 60s, I was teaching philosophy at the New School for Social Research. And I had been influenced by existential philosophy. And I had been in analysis myself. I've been in first psychoanalysis, Freudian, and then family-oriented with Laura Singer. And then she sent me to a Jungian. I was in that for a while. And I became very interested in the development of the psychotherapeutic theories. And so I offered a course at the New School in psychotherapeutic theory. And Renee Nell was my Jungian therapist. So I had some discussions with her, and she pointed out that the development of humanistic psychology and Esalen Institute in California was very much influenced by recent thought in psychotherapy, particularly Fritz Perls and Gestalt psychology, and also Reichianism was pretty popular at the time. So I got interested in all of that, and I began talking about it at the school, and all the kids got interested also, and I got a big following, and then they all wanted to see me. But I didn't have a place for them. I was just living in a single room not far from the school. So I asked the dean if I could see them in the office. He said, oh, maybe a couple of people, but you can't have a regular practice here. So one of the one of the people who was interested was a woman who I got involved with, and she looked around for me for a place, and she found a space for me to have an office in Sheridan Square, which was a very nice space, and it was very cheap because it was originally like a basement, semi-basement restaurant, and it had a couple of studio-sized spaces in the basement, and one of them had been used by the fellow who wrote the autobiography of Malcolm X. Alex something, Haley, Alex, well, I don't remember the name. Anyway, he had been in the back room there, and I think that's where he wrote the autobiography of Malcolm X. And it was right across, it was right on the little triangular park across the street from the place where they had the gay riots. Stonewall, across from Stonewall Inn. So, you know, it was kind of a good spot. And it was attractive because it had a little triangular park there.
Christopher Street, yeah?
No, it was Grove Street.
Oh, Grove.
Christopher Street was Stonewall, and the other side was Grove Street. They ran into each other. Anyway, it was an attractive place. I fixed it up a little bit, but, you know, it was old and I didn't fix it up that much, but I made it presentable. And then I used to see people there. And all of a sudden, I began to have a lot of people coming. So I don't know how, but I got interested in groups. I guess because of the influence of Esalen. Group therapy was becoming popular. And I became interested in that because I had so many people anyway. So I put them into groups. I was running like 2 groups every night, every evening. So that was about...
Did you use one modality over another, or a combination of all, in like
no,
kind of your own?
I just developed my own point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then existential psychotherapy became popular.
What's the definition of existential psychotherapy?
Well, it was influenced by existential philosophy.
Uh-huh. But how do you incorporate the two together?
Well, existential philosophy was really psychologically oriented in the first place, because European thought was very much ensconced in the literary tradition, which was more psychological than scientific. It was much more literary and traditional, classical. And it emphasized human existence. That's why it's called existentialism. Human existence as contrasted to essence. Essence is general theoretical constructs behind science which was the emphasis in Anglo-American thought, which it still is. I mean, there's that contrast.
Let me just take 1 second. Hold on. Okay.
And then I was interested in Martin Buber, who came out of that European existential tradition. And he wrote a book called I and Thou, based upon the notion of dialogue between human beings and also between human beings and God, who he conceived of as a thou, not as a thing, but as somehow a person type being. Anyway, it was all very carefully based on neo-Kantian philosophy, which I had been already interested in before I went to Europe, even. So I just picked up on that, and it seemed like an outgrowth of all the things I had been interested in. And basically, I was interested in people. So I began running these groups, and I had like over 100 people in the groups. So also I was having trouble with my visitation with Ariel and her mother. Her mother made it difficult. So this girl I got involved with, her name was Karen, helped me find this office, and then we went upstate for a conference at Lake Minnewaska. There was a psychology conference influenced by Esalen. Those kinds of things were all in the air at the time. So she came up with me, and we stayed in Lake Minnewaska. The hotel there was called the Wild Mere. It's since burned down, but it was a very old hotel from before the Civil War, and it was pretty much still in that style of furnishing, and it had objects in it that were like 100 years old. So it was very charming, but it was also an extraordinarily beautiful place. It still is a very beautiful, unusual place. So we were thrilled by being there. And I said, well, maybe this would be a place where we could look for some place where I could bring Ariel. So I wouldn't have to deal so much with our mother's interferences, which had been recommended by my lawyer anyway. So we left the place and we started driving down the highway, and there was a real estate agent sign. So we drove in and asked him to show us if he had anything. He said, yeah, he had a lot of places. And he had a pack of pictures. He started shuffling the pictures. And then at the bottom, there was a picture of this very rustic-looking cabin. He said, well, you wouldn't be interested in that. Oh, I said, why not? He said, because it's too primitive. He said, well, let's take us a look at it. So he took us there, and it was about 20 miles from Lake Minnewaska, and it was on a triangular base towards Woodstock, where Ariel was. So it was about 30 miles from Woodstock and 20 miles from Lake Minnewaska. So we liked that, and it turned out it was a very beautiful place. So when we drove up the driveway, I said in my mind right away, this is it. And so we drove up, and the fellow who owned the place showed us around, and he tried to sell it. He was very high pressure selling it, but I had already decided I was going to buy it. So I didn't even make any bargaining motions. I just accepted his price. And I could have gotten it cheaper, but I didn't even realize. And actually, I was making quite a bit of money from all the people who were coming to see me. I didn't charge them that much, but there were so many of them, it added up to quite a bit of money. So I was making more money than I expected, certainly more money than teaching. So I felt flush enough to buy the place. So he wanted half of the cost right down, and the other half paid off in 5 years. So I agreed to it. And this girl, Karen, she liked it a lot. And so I bought it. And I had in mind, well, this would be a great place where I could bring people up for weekends. I can have weekend groups, weekend retreats up here. It's perfect for that. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. I bought it and started bringing people up on weekends. You know, in those days, it was very cheap to have a car, and gas was very cheap. So a lot of the people had cars and came up. And so I ran groups up there, and it was popular. So then my cousin said I should set it up as a retreat center and give it a name and incorporate it, and there would be tax advantages. So I said, yeah, that's a good idea. So I gave it the name of Encounter Institute, because Encounter was Martin Buber's idea of human interaction. Human interaction was an encounter. And that was a popular term for groups. They were called encounter groups at Esalen. So I called the place, I called it Encounter Institute, set it up, and I used to bring a lot of people up there for weekends. And I used to run weekend marathons, and then I would arrange to have private sessions, and it got to be very busy.
Can you give me an idea of what the retreats were like and what the groups were like, the format, the subject matter, how you led them?
It was just a regular group of 6 to 8 people who were interacting. That was what they called encounter. They were learning how to interact with one another. I mean, it was the beginning of what nowadays is called relationship therapy. It was the beginning of an awareness that the essential thing is human relationships. And it was a spin-off from Freudianism, which had been emphasizing past events in a person's life and counter emphasize present events, a present mode of dealing with other persons, basically, especially, of course, opposite sex, or so-called opposite sex. And then, of course, the so-called sexual revolution was a big influence on psychology at the time and society at the time. So people were trying to deal with sexual relationships in a more progressive way, let's say, than it had been in the past.
1 second. 1 second. Okay.
And also, it was very non-directive. I've been influenced by guys by the name of Rogers, who had a theory of non-directive psychotherapy in which you elicit emotion and feeling and responses from people rather than trying to dig into their past, directing them in any way. So that was basically the idea, and bringing them into a natural environment made it all the more likely that they would be relaxed and let go, so to speak. And it happened, and actually people liked it, and some of them even began to come up to help me fix the place up during the week. And one fella by the name of Steve Weinberg came up to be the caretaker, and he was in therapy with me. He was an actor, but he wanted to do something more socially significant, and he decided he would like to be a chiropractor. He went to chiropractor school. He became a chiropractor. He became very successful. He's now one of the big chiropractors in New York City with a nice office on Gramercy Park. And that's the kind of thing that happened. So it was very nice. And then I used to bring Ariel up every weekend. And she would meet a lot of these people. And it was very good for her. It was like kind of a social experience. And I just kept doing it as long as people were interested. But it got to be difficult to maintain the place. And people began having difficulty getting there because it got to be more expensive having a car. And a lot of people sort of drifted out. But I kept doing it for a long time. I started in 1969. And I kept doing it until the 80s. And then I had some problems with the property. I had to get some construction work done. It got to be difficult to do after a while. And also I was maintaining my practice in the city, so I was extremely busy.
How many people would you have on a weekend?
On the weekend, I would have about 10 to 20 people.
Really?
And we had a big Thanksgiving party one year where we had 50 people.
Yeah, I was wondering if there are any particularly memorable weekends where something happened, or something dramatic, or good, or bad, or.
Well, that's what, yeah, we had a Thanksgiving party with 50 people. That was pretty nice. I mean, they all got a good time. It was just a party. And some of the people I saw had experiences which they felt were like breakthroughs for them. You know, I mean, I don't want to go into any detail. But it seemed to be fairly promising and successful. It's hard for me to remember it even right now, but
Well, I'm curious if, because usually when groups come together, there's some kind of conflict that happens eventually. You know, there's the highs and the lows of when people come together.
well, we didn't have many conflicts. It was a very congenial, congenial process that people liked it. They just they enjoyed being there, and you know, getting outside, getting away from New York City was in those days a big thing. You know, because in the '60s had been kind of opened up to the notion of Mother Nature and natural environments and healthier styles of living, and they all responded to that. And mostly they responded to the place. The place was very beautiful. There's a pond, a lot of trees, and I had built a sauna. People used to take a sauna and swim in the pond. You know, it was a prototype of a lot of the kinds of. I mean, there's a lot of them now, but a lot of the retreat centers. But I was early on, and of course I was not a guru. There was no Oriental aspect to it. But later on, the yoga and Oriental philosophy persons started these kinds of centers, and now they're all over the place, even up there. Retreat centers, of course, and spas, stuff like that. It's all over the place. But this was in the early '70s, and there weren't that many people doing it at the time.
It sounds like it was mutually nourishing for you and for the people that came up.
Yeah, I found it very satisfying.
What kinds of
Brian, there was, I wouldn't say it was directive, it was non-directive, but behind it all was my personal orientation towards the significance of amicable human relationships, you know, which I had always been interested in. And that was what I was trying to say last time. This was a little bit off off the off the style of of traditional American ideology of self-interested pursuit of of, of I guess I have to call it of a grandiose accumulation, you know. And I had always been turned off by that anyway.
Grandiose accumulation? Can you say more about that?
Yeah, well, yeah, well, when I was a boy, I already had this feeling because, as I mentioned, my father was an extremely decent, warm, and kindly person. And when he changed from being a diamond cutter to a diamond dealer, he didn't do very well because he didn't have this same kind of sly, cunning, uh, foxy attitude about it that many of them did. He was not a conniver. And he wasn't a shrewd, crafty schemer trying to get ahead of everybody else. So, but they were. I mean, most of them were. And it was American, part of the American cowboy mentality. You know, I mean, it's now considered even to be something admirable, to be clever and ruthless and crafty. So I thought of that as being a limitation of human life. And of course,
Hang on, sorry, one second again. Okay.
and of course, all the traditional religions had been founded on kind of a reaction against that kind of craftiness. So that's and and the existential movement was influenced by that notion also. So then it was tied into kind of religious traditions, which it still is. So that was my point of view, and I had already had those feelings when I was a child. So it was the basic pursuit of my life.
Well, it sounds like it worked very well. You touched the lives of many people. You help people transform.
Yeah, it worked very well, and I did influence a lot of people. Then I began to get, mostly I got artistic people. I got a lot of actors and actresses and people in the graphic arts. And then I got references. I began to get references to people who were more into the financial world. And I wasn't as successful with them, although I tried. So,
Was there an element of, Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
pardon?
Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Were you
Yeah, well,
were you working
I
toward
had known
self-realization,
I
or?
had known Maslow, and yeah, and he was one of my influences, and I had him come in and talk to my classes at the new school, and yeah, his ideas were part of my influenced on me. I wouldn't say. I already had these ideas by the time he was developing them, but he was in that tradition. Uh,
Was there some kind of focus at all on self-realization, or?
basically, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
basically, the focus was on self-realization, self-actualization, but above all, on relationships, on interpersonal relationships. My memory for names is slipping. So there's a good one person I wanted to mention, but I can't remember.
You mean the people that were in the group?
No,
Yeah.
I'm influenced.
Oh, influenced by. Mm-hmm.
A British psychologist had a big influence at the time. I forget.
Winnicott or somebody?
Pardon?
Winnicott?
No, it was before Winnicott. I forget his name. It'll come to me. Anyway, the point is that all of these people were thinking along similar lines. Rollo May was an influence. Eric Fromm. They were Americans. But there were a lot of people who were European, French and English. German, Swiss.
What do you mean, Katie?
There was a whole bunch of people who were thinking along these lines and had a big influence on American psychology. Still does.
Katie Lang.
Pardon?
Katie Lang.
Lang, R.D. Lang.
R.D. Lang, I'm getting confused.
Yeah, that's right. See that?
Yeah.
Good memory.
Yeah,
Good.
well,
Yeah, R.D. Lang.
Lang.
He was very influential. I forget what he wrote, but his books were very influential, and his ideas were very influential. And he also was one of the people who pioneered the idea of retreats, of bringing people into together into nice environments and have them relate to one another in a living environment. Mm-hmm. He was one of the pioneers in that idea. Mm-hmm. He actually had the idea of having communities, communities where people could live together. Mm-hmm. That was influential on the '60s idea of communes. Mm-hmm. But he had the idea of bringing mental patients into those environments. What was called, in those days, they didn't call them mentally ill, neurotic people, disturbed people, people who had some disturbances of one kind or another. They didn't have to be serious disturbances, just normal, everyday living disturbances. He was very influential, R.D. Lang.
And Harvey Jackins, was he? Did you know him?
Who?
Harvey Jackins
I haven't heard him.
started reevaluation counseling.
No, that's all come
That's
later.
all later.
There's all, right, I mean, there's been a whole a lot of it that came later.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Myth of Mental Illness was an important book that was written by an American psychologist, again, whose name I can't remember. But anyway, The Myth of Mental Illness, he wrote, and he had a big, tremendous influence on Scientology. No, he was anti the medicalization of mental problems. He was opposed to that, and he wrote some very good things, which had a big influence. But nobody mentions him anymore. But the point is, all of this stuff mushroomed, so that now it's like it's common sense. You know, pop psychology is everywhere. And if you read the newspapers, it's all over the newspapers. It's all over the science section of the New York Times. You know, it's all over social work. All the social work schools now turn out therapists who are influenced by this idea, these ideas. And they read books like Viktor Frankl, the meaning of human existence. Say, Viktor Frankl was influential on the ideas also. I think he's still alive. Anyway, I was talking to one of the social workers at the Hudson Guild 2 weeks ago, and she pulled out a copy from her desk of Viktor Frankl's book on the meaning of human existence. I forget the exact title. So she was studying social work at Fordham, and she said the school at Fordham, of course, it was originally a Catholic university, so there's a big religious influence on the School of Social Work.
I got my degree from social work from Fordham.
Yeah, you told me that.
Yeah.
So she told me the school is very good, but they're very much background oriented with religious thought. So I say, well, okay, that's good if they understand it. I mean, you know, there's a religious thought and there's a religious thought. There's dogma, and then there is sophisticated traditional religion. I said the sophisticated people don't believe the kind of fundamentalist stuff that some of them do. There's some of the people who propagate, like the American fundamentalists, you know, are very literalistic about it and dogmatic and moralistic. But I said, but there are people who have important positions in the churches and the synagogues who are much more sophisticated than that. And some of them are anthropologists and archaeologists. I have a friend upstate who is a priest, the Episcopal priest, and he has a PhD in anthropology. And he's very sophisticated about the origins of religion and the origins of moral behavior and so forth. He's extremely sophisticated.
Sorry, 1 second again.
So he's asked me to give talks to his parishioners I said I would, but so far I haven't gotten around to it. But he did have one talk about the healthcare reform debate, and he had a pharmacist, one of this big pharmacist from town came, and he had some very critical things to say, which was good for a pharmacist. And then they wanted to know my opinion. The pharmacist. So I got up and I said, well, you know, it's misnamed. There's a very good impulse behind it, but it's not about health, and it's not about care, and it's not about reform. I say those are all misinterpretations. I say if it was really about those things, it would be good, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So they all clapped. Okay, fine.
Right, exactly.
Anyway, but I mean, the point is, I was able to say that, up there.
Mm-hmm.
It was the only place that I could say it.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people up there are Republican, are fundamental Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't say much of anything.
Mm-hmm.
Although there is a really radical group called Empowering Ellenville, and they're trying to run groups for the high school kids who are getting into drugs. So they called me about a month ago and they said, would I come down and run a group? I said, yeah, but not until the end of March. I'm up here for the winter.
And how would you run the group now?
Well, I mean, this is elementary. I wouldn't run it the way I used to run it. But I mean, I know how to get the kids. I know how to get the kids to talk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's very important that they just be able to talk
Mm-hmm.
about what they feel.
Mm-hmm.
It's very simple.
Mm-hmm.
To talk about what they feel to somebody who they feel is an authority. But I stop in there at the place called Family, which is a social service agency up there, which has grants to help single mothers, unwed mothers. I mean, welfare mothers. And they're trying to help these girls up there. And I go over and I talk to them sometimes. I mean, just off the cuff.
You basically just listen to them?
Basically, I mean, that's basically they need to be. I mean, everybody needs to be listened to. Nobody, most people don't know how to listen. Most people just talk without listening.
Right, yeah.
So,
is that fulfilling for you to do that kind of volunteer work?
no, because it's too limited. I mean, it's not organized. I told them at the place, I'd have to organize it into a structured situation. And I said, well, we don't really want to offer therapy. I said, well, I mean, you don't have to call it therapy. He said, well, if it looks like therapy, it's therapy. So I said, okay.
How would you describe
I mean,
it?
there's a problem because Ulster County Mental Health Society has a monopoly on mental health services, what they call mental health services. So they don't want to be interfered with. I don't want to interfere with them, but I think there was There was a couple of psychiatrists up there who went out of business. And I think there's a few mental health counselors around up there. I don't know how well they do. But I know that the Ulster County Mental Health Society keeps very close tabs on it. So there's a political aspect to it. And yeah, that's all. I mean, they have connections to the hospital and stuff like that.
I'm guessing it's very traditional and
Yeah.
limited.
Extremely traditional, and anybody who's really disturbed, they insist they send him to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist loads them up with drugs right away.
So what do you think is healing for people really?
Pardon?
Based on what do you think is really healing for people really? Healing, what's healing for people with, supposed mental illness?
Yeah. I mean, what's healing? I mean, it's just, it's just a cliche to say it. What's healing is love. That's what's healing. But, that's a small word. That's a small word with a big meaning. So...
And as a professional, how can you offer that? How can a professional offer that to their clients?
Oh, professionals can offer it by caring. Caring is a form of love. That's what health care means, care. And any physician who knows anything about it knows that that's the most important element in medical attention, care. Psychological aspect of it. Every good physician knows that, despite what they learned in school. It's not mechanical application of some kind of established scientific tradition. And sophisticated laymen know that too. But there is a age-old conflict between religion and science, which is still going on. But sophisticated scientists know that it's a superficial conflict. And sophisticated religious people know that it's a superficial conflict. That the root of religion and the root of science are the same. The basic principles behind all human endeavor has been to establish empathetic relationships between human beings. That goes back to ancient time, prehistoric times. The more the archaeologists explore ancient civilizations, the more elements they find of a human impulse towards, I could only call it empathy. Empathy is a word they even use. Meaning the capacity of a human being to enter into the concerns of another human being.
I've read some.
That best civilization is based upon that.
I've read that some I can't remember the name of the author, said that he thinks that the survival of our species is dependent on people learning that at a very young age.
Exactly. Yeah, you can see, read that in the newspapers these days. That's right. Exactly. And that's what the conflict between the Democrats and Republicans boiled down to. The Democratic Party has been infused by that ideology, not completely, but basically. And the Republican Party is infused by the opposite ideology, by ideology of self-interest, what they call self-interest. But even even the big thinkers behind the Republican Party were more sophisticated than that. But the Republicans haven't got any real education. They never studied history of thought. It doesn't interest them.
Right.
So
Sheldon,
So let's see. Oh.
stop doing
Stop
that.
it.
Well, yeah, if you can. I don't want to.
anyway,
So where were we?
So that's-
we're in like the. How long did you lead the? Huh?
I think he was just about to say something.
Oh, okay.
Go on, Sean. Sorry.
so that's the basis upon which I started these groups upstate, and that's what I did for many, many years. Plus my practice in the city. But then I got cancer in the 90s, and I had to stop working. So, but I worked up until the time I got the cancer. And I was very busy all the time. And then I was also very busy with Ariel because it was very important to me to maintain that relationship. And it was very difficult because although it was only 30 or 40 miles away, it was 30, 40 miles. And I had to get up there from the city, pick her up, take her to the house. But it meant a lot to her, and the experience of the house and everything meant a lot to her.
Were there any particular activities you enjoyed doing with Ariel?
No special. Just being together, that's all. Putting the food on the table. She matured very early, and pretty soon she was able to just fend for herself up there. And she still comes up and, basically, Lake Minnewaska is a big thing to her. She goes there all the time. I never influenced her that way, but she discovered it herself. And there's the reservoir. She likes to ride a bike around the reservoir. She has a good basic love of nature. So to her it meant a lot physically to be able to be there. And then she met a lot of people. And of course, they were people who were exploring themselves, so they were amenable to being with a child. I don't know, it just went very fast. Amazing to me how fast it all went. But now it's all gone. And the last few years have been very distressing to me because I didn't expect the American culture to evolve the way it did. I thought it was going to evolve more in the direction that I believe in, and it has evolved very much more in the other direction, in the Reagan-esque direction. I mean, Ronald Reagan was a disaster for American culture. But I got to be careful of what I say. Like last time, I said things about America that I don't mean about America. It's not about America. It's about a group of people who are primitive and psychologically unsophisticated and anti-progressive. And there's a great group of those people around, and they're having a lot of influence on the culture at large. So, and I'm very distressed by the amount of people out there who are being influenced in that way.
Are there any contemporaries that you respect or appreciate their work and what they're contributing?
Yeah, I mean, if you read the books that are coming out, there's a lot of people who are thinking about it and trying. A lot of people in the academy who are investigating these things. There's a famous guy who wrote a book 30 years ago about justice. I forget his name too, but had a big influence and still does.
Rawls?
Pardon?
You mean Rawls?
Rawls.
Yeah.
Yeah, John Rawls wrote a book about it. And he's still very influential, but only in the academy. I mean, not widespread. What's the name of his book again?
Can't remember. Theory of Justice?
Theory of Justice, yeah. And then there's this professor now at Columbia who has become kind of well known, Maurice Sandel. And he speaks on the radio and television, I guess. And he's very good. I mean, he wrote a book called Justice that just came out. It's kind of elementary, but it's in the right direction. It deals with these issues. But it deals mostly on an abstract level. It doesn't deal with the psychological aspect of it. It deals with the philosophical aspect. But the psychological aspect is the important one, because if you have a widespread epidemic of selfishness and greed, it's going to destroy the society. It's already having very destructive aspects to it. Like, for instance, people can't understand how this kid in Connecticut, in Newtown, Connecticut, went out and killed 20 children. They have no comprehension that this is a result of a disturbed environment. That the mother was disturbed, the father was disturbed, and probably the whole town is disturbed. And the whole school is disturbed. There's something problematic going on somewhere in order for some kid to do that. Something very serious. And there's more and more of this stuff, reading the papers, more and more of these people who go berserk. By the time they go berserk, they're extremely distressed. Their mental functioning is extremely problematic by the time that happens.
So how do you think you can?
You can prevent it by having a widespread emphasis on treatment of disturbed people. Adequate treatment of disturbed people.
Well, what kind of systems do you recommend having in place to identify?
Well, it's a very big problem because, unfortunately, it's dominated by the medical profession, and the medical profession is dominated by a lot of dogma that they can't let go of, and profiteering and so forth. So it's unfortunate that Freud was a doctor. So he established the notion that therapy has to be done by medical people, but that's wrong. Therapy can't be done by medical people. It's not a medical issue, not the way they describe it. It's a spiritual issue. But you're not allowed to use that word.
Can you say more about that?
Pardon?
Can you say more about that? What kind of spiritual issue?
Well, it has to do with the human psyche, the human spirit, the human mind, as I said, was developed out of a very early variation from the primates, in which the human mind became capable of empathy for other human beings and capacity for cooperation and caring. And that's the basis of civilization. And it's the basis of any human being being really productive. So it has to be emphasized. And it has to be emphasized in the educational system, but it isn't. The educational system is dominated by mechanical skills. So they're concerned about turning out vocational persons, people with vocational skills. They're not concerned with turning out human beings. All right? So Obama wants to have universal preschool education. Very good, if it even happens. But even if it happens, still the question is, what are you going to teach these young kids? I mean, just teaching them how to play with, how to fix toys is not what they need. That's what they're going to teach them.
What do they need?
They need to learn how to get along with one another. They need to learn to care about each other and to help each other. And they have a natural impulse to do that. But that has to be developed by the teachers. It has to be encouraged by the teachers. Not how to play with Legos. But that's what they're going to give them. They're just going to give them toys to play with.
Right.
So, I mean, that's what they do. Even in the graduate schools, they give kids toys. They give toys to play with. So, I mean, if you're going to go to graduate school, you should be learning something about the human tradition. But in the graduate, even the graduate schools now are oriented toward skill training, like master's degrees in business, MBA, business skills, or legal skills, law school, legal skills, or medical school, medical skills. So those people that turn out to be skilled, but they don't turn out to be human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's all, and that's, I mean, everybody knows the difference. If you just go against a group of people, you can sense that they're aware of the difference. They want to have a relationship with each other. They don't want to they don't want to just manipulate each other. But everything encourages them to be manipulative. The whole society is geared towards manipulativeness.
Yeah.
How you can get more for your money. You know, like the sales and bargains and all that. I mean, the newspapers are just full of advertisements and tricks of the trade, tricks of, like, I picked up the paper today and a little thing, an advertisement from McDonald's fell out. And McDonald's is now offering these bargains, like 2 for 1, or free if you buy something and you can get something else free. And that kind of merchandising is everywhere. And people get into it. Yeah, I mean, everybody gets sucked into it.
Yeah.
I get sucked into it too.
Yeah. Have you seen anyone design a curriculum that makes sense for what you're talking about?
Yeah, at Columbia, they started the Great Books program, the Classics program, first 2 years of college. They had a special required program of the classics. I forget what they call them. Yeah, but it was a special program. I don't know if they still have it.
Can you say more about that?
Well, one of the professors who started it just died last year at 104 going on 105. And I knew him. He was French. He came over when he was 11 or 12 years old. But he already was French. And his whole career, he became very successful. But nobody knows much about him. I mean, I know a lot about him. But his whole career was a lament about the deterioration of civilization. And he would say some of the same things I'm saying. But he thought it had to do with the development of science. The religious adoration of science. And with the corruption of the arts into titillation, like television, and with the corruption of philanthropy, which is giving of money to big organizations that are presumably charitable but really don't do anything valuable. He was continually lamenting those things.
What was his name? Could you just put his name so we have a...
Barzin, Jacques Barzin. And he wrote a book called House of Intellect, in which he advocated what I'm talking. He advocated an education which incorporated things like I was talking about, but it never had much of an influence. And when he died, he was writing. He was almost 105 years old. He was writing a book called From Dawn to Decadence, meaning from original society to the decline of society. But I don't think he ever finished it. I mean, but he must have known something. He lived to be almost 105.
So what was the curriculum like at Columbia?
He was reading of classics.
Oh, sorry, hold on a second. Can you just repeat that? I missed it.
Like he was supposed to read people like Plato, Aristotle, St. Augustine, and the French philosophers like Montesquieu, Montaigne, Rousseau. If you pick up books by these people, it's astonishing. They were thinking very modern thoughts already 300 years ago. Rousseau was remarkable, but nobody reads him.
What can you say about Rousseau?
He knew what I'm talking about, that the origin of human values was in primitive people already. It was in the early people, and that it got devalued. Fundamental human values got devalued by corruptions in civilization, by the arts and sciences, what he said. But he meant the same thing that this guy, Jacques Barzin, meant, that it becomes corrupt. Science becomes corrupt. Art becomes corrupt. Rousseau already knew that. Well, he was one of the originators of the French Revolution. And Montesquieu said the same things. They didn't even know much anthropology, but they speculated about it. And that was their natural inclination to think that primitive man was more civilized than modern man. And there's people who are still writing that, like names slipping my mind.
And matriarchal cultures as
Pardon?
well? Matriarchal cultures were
Yeah,
also...
yeah, well, yeah, originally there were no patriarchal cultures. I mean, of course there were some. I mean, there were tribal societies which were violent. Of course, there were some. But on the other hand, there were some that were very constructive. know, the Egyptians built the pyramids, and they were symbolic structures, but they keep discovering earlier and earlier human remains that have symbolic significance and that were built on basis of social cooperation. They keep discovering more and more of them, further and further back.
If you could live during any time in our history, what would it be?
Pardon?
If you could live
If I could live
any time in our history.
I guess in the 1750s when Benjamin Franklin was writing. He was a very interesting guy. I mean, the guys who came out of the early development of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, American Revolution, they were thinking the same thing around along these lines, because they were influenced by the French Revolution, by French thinkers like Rousseau and Diderot. They were all these ideas were percolating around already 300 years ago. But even before, I mean, if you go back into history, all these ideas were percolating all the time. The Hebrew prophets who lived hundreds of years before Jesus Christ were talking about the same things. I took a course in Columbia on the Old Testament. And the guy who offered, I forget his name, and I don't know, but he was very enthused about the Hebrew prophets. He was a Christian, but he was very enthused about the Hebrew prophets. And, you know, there was a course at Columbia. I don't think that they are offering it anymore. They were talking about the same stuff. I don't know how far back it goes. I'm not even that familiar with the history of Judaism, but there are some people who think it goes back very much further than it's been traced so far. Like there's a debate over the Dead Sea Scrolls that's going on right now about the origin of the Dead Sea Scrolls, who wrote them, when they were written. Stuff like that's still going on. But yeah, I mean, you don't have to know all this stuff. All you have to know is watch human behavior, and you can tell just by your own observations. You can tell who's a decent person and who's not. It's very easy.
I was thinking of just sort of taking just a general question. What things people have given you most joy in your life?
The most joy I got was from Ariel. Still, I mean, she was a beautiful child, and she turned out to be a beautiful person. And that's very satisfying to me, very pleasing to me. I mean, I guess I tend to exaggerate it,
What do you admire most about her?
I think she has this feeling that I'm talking about. She has a feeling for other people that's very deep and profound and caring. She's a very caring person. And also, she's extremely intelligent. I mean, but that's the main thing. Beneath it all, she has a very caring quality. And she expresses it, and she does things along those lines.
Do you enjoy speaking to her about all of these types of topics
I
that you've
don't, I
explored?
don't discuss it with her.
Oh, you don't?
Oh, we don't have discussions. We just with each other, that's all. I know how she feels. She knows how I feel. I mean, my love for her is profound, and she cares about me. But I feel like she's the best thing that ever happened to me. She's the best thing in my life, even now. Although I don't see much of her. But like I went through this Hurricane Irene 2 years ago. It was horrendous what damage it did upstate. Tremendous, very shocking, traumatic damages. And she came back up. She came up this summer, and she took care of it all. It was amazing what she did. Amazing. She took care of the guys who were doing the construction. Amazing. She even got in and worked the machines. So I was very impressed because she's extremely competent. I mean, it's not just that she's a caring person. She's extremely competent.
Yeah.
And even now, I think she was just up there. She went up there for a funeral, and she stopped at the house. She told me. She stopped to take a look at things. It's probably buried in snow. She went to a funeral on the weekend, Sunday, I guess. Mother of one of her childhood friends died. But I mean, the mother was a friend of our mother. She wasn't that old, but she's been sick. She had skin cancer for years. So I think she died a few days ago, and Ariel went up for the funeral. I'm sure it wasn't pleasant for her. She called me to let me. She called me when she was on her way back to let me know she's on her way back. Because it was probably very cold up there, I imagine. It's been, in the newspaper, it's been like 2 degrees or something up there. It's been very close to zero.
Yeah.
But I'm very eager to get back up there as soon as the weather permits.
What do you like to do when you're up there?
Just sit and look at it. I got I got all my papers and books that I got. I got to keep going through and get. I got to start getting rid of. I have to start getting rid of papers and books.
Let me throw another question at you.
Yeah.
Who are you? What kind of person are you, do you think?
I don't know. I guess I try to be the kind of person that I was talking about. I'm a caring person.
Are you feeling okay, Sheldon?
What?
Are you feeling okay?
Well, yeah. This doing this thing has been somewhat painful for me. I mean, thinking back about things, and during the week, I'm thinking about things that I didn't mention, things I forgot, people I remember that I didn't mention, and stuff like that keeps coming back to me. And I'm having some bad dreams once in a while. Mostly about people who've done me dead, done me wrong. Or might do me wrong, I mean, I'm going to be 87 years old next month. I can't believe it. But, basically everything is over. So, you know, I'm feeling that, and I got to worry about myself. I don't take good enough care of myself.
How would you like to take care of yourself? What kind of care do you think you need?
Well, I should eat better, you know. I should probably see medical professionals more. Check things out. I mean, although I don't trust them to do anything, but I should check things out. The system is very bad. The medical system is extremely bad. It's just, most of them are just like automobile mechanics. That's what they're like.
Yeah.
They think the same way. They function the same way.
I find that Ayurvedic medicine or Chinese.
Of course, it's better because it's based on human tradition. It's based upon the values I'm talking about.
My Chinese doctor spends an hour with me. It's not just one remedy for every illness. It's a special remedy just for you.
Exactly. It's person oriented.
It's personal, yeah. Body, mind, spirit.
That's right. Well, that's what I'm talking about. But that's tradition. Every human tradition is like that. All the traditions. That's what Deepak Chopra keeps writing about. But they don't pay any attention to him. I mean, the medical people don't pay attention to them. I mean, what I've been talking about has been talked about over and over and over again. It's nothing new. It's talked about in this way, that way, you know, more sophisticated methods. I mean, more sophisticated backgrounds, but basically it's the same stuff. That's what the professors I was influenced by talked about. Paul Tillich and Reinhold Niebuhr. That's what they were talking about. But they became famous for a short while. But they both they manifested this quality when they got up to speak. They manifested a quality of humanness in their very carriage, in their very being, came across that they were inspired, so to speak, by a system of values. Personally, particularly Tillich. I mean, he had a remarkable quality of presence, but it's gone. It's not especially in the things he wrote. It was in his personhood.
Sheldon, do you have a sense of satisfaction looking at your life? Is there anything you would change?
Yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with what I've done.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I don't believe in any of the superstitious, otherworldly aspects of religion. I don't believe in any of that stuff. I mean, I believe that this is the world we live in. There is one world, and we make the best of it. And we die, and and then we're gone, except possibly in the memory of some people. As far as what I would change about what I have done, the main thing I would change is is possibly my relationship to Virginia, to Ariel's mother. I think I made some mistakes and I did some things that were not so good, and I would change some of that. But I didn't do anything malicious. I just made some mistakes. But I didn't make the mistake of not having a child with her. That was a very good decision. I wish I had more.
Well, I'm curious. You've lived such an interesting and fulfilling life. You've learned so many things. What would you pass on? What would you like to pass on to future generations as
Same thing I'm just telling you. That the important thing is caring, as simple as it is.
so care for each other?
Right. Caring about other human beings. Whoever you meet, you have to have capacity to care about, not to manipulate or to try to con into something, to try and exploit. That to do that is an ultimate evil, and is happening every day. Better to do nothing than to exploit people. I mean, you read about it in the paper every day. In fact, in fact, some people get away of even proposing it. That's what this kid from Wisconsin, Ryan, that the Republicans are putting up as a hero. That's what he proposes. He's an evil kid from Wisconsin. I mean, I was in Wisconsin. I know about Wisconsin. He's just a rotten kid from Wisconsin. And they're putting him up as a hero. So, and there are others, like Gingrich. Gingrich is a dangerous man. I mean, but those are just obvious examples. I mean, you can meet people every day.
What do you enjoy doing the most?
What do I enjoy doing the most?
Mm-hmm.
Seeing your Ariel and reading. I enjoy reading too much.
It seems to me like you have a passion for knowledge, for learning.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I've done my share, and I've explored a lot of things that are considered to be sort of advanced. I mean, I went into mathematics, physics, philosophy, history, literature. You know who was one of the greatest minds that ever lived? Shakespeare. Shakespeare is extraordinary. People just don't appreciate how tremendous he is.
What do you see in Shakespeare?
Pardon?
What do you see in Shakespeare?
That capacity that I'm talking about, that capacity for understanding human beings, being concerned. It's all there. I mean, it's extraordinary. And, you know, he had tremendous insight, too. I mean, there was a girl who was, there's a girl, an actress, who was offering a little Shakespeare program at the senior center last year. So I went to it. It was very good, very nice. And, you know, she had everybody reading something from Shakespeare. So I read something from the sonnets. And I told them it was already there in the sonnets. Everything that was his perception was already there in the sonnets, if you read them carefully. But of course, you know, he developed it in an amazing extent. Amazing. I don't know how he did it. I mean, it's extraordinary he was able to do that. He had to sit there and do that.
Strikes me about Shakespeare that he had tremendous insight into people, but he wasn't, in a strict sense, he wasn't a philosopher. He didn't have a philosophy, though. Did
No,
he?
no,
He had a scheme.
no. He was not. He was not a systematic thinker. No, but I mean, it's all in there. You don't have to be. You didn't have to be a professional philosopher. You don't have to be a professional anything. I mean, he had tremendous insight, and also, I mean, had tremendous capacity for caring. It was he had a care. Empathy is the word. Capacity to understand other people, care about them.
Do you feel at this point in your life there's anything else you'd like to learn?
1 second, sorry, hold on, wait. Okay.
Not really, no. I'm worried about what's going to happen, but
What are you worried about?
I'm worried about what people who are running the world are going to be doing. I mean, after Obama gets out, who knows what's going to happen? He's got good intentions, but basically he's powerless. I mean, they're not going to let him do anything. They're not letting him do anything. They're letting him talk. But even that they don't like. So, yeah, I'm worried about the machinations of the people who have a lot of power, a lot of money and a lot of power. And some people have just extraordinary amounts of money and power. I never even realized how much. It's not the money, it's the power. But the money gives them a lot of power. Yeah, so it kind of worries me. In fact, it worries me a lot.
For yourself personally, or for generations to
No,
come?
for mankind.
For mankind. Mm-hmm.
I mean, these homicidal maniacs are everywhere. You know, I mean, uh, everywhere. I mean, I don't think they should be destroyed, but they should be prevented.
Well, you're worried. Do you nevertheless retain some hope for people? I mean, sounds
Yeah,
like you do.
yeah, I retain a lot of hope because I think there are a lot of good people around. There are a lot of good people around. You know, they're not very effective, but there are a lot of good people around. Basically, sure. I mean, I think there are more good people than bad people. But it's very difficult to do anything. It's difficult to know what to do, even. Most people are just trying to survive.
Are there any communities or any organizations that you support?
Oh.
That are doing work that's contributing to mankind?
Well, I like SAGE, which is the Senior Center for Gay People. I forget why I call it SAGE. It's Senior Advocacy for Gay something. Yeah. It's a very odd, interesting place.
What do you like about it?
Well, the people who are working there are terrific people. They're wonderful people. I guess most of them are gay. Yeah, they're gay. That's why they're working there.
And you have an affinity with...
I mean, gay is the wrong word. I mean, they're all over 65. They're all, so, you know, they're not gay. I mean, gay is the wrong word. A little of them, some of them have a little swishy character to them. I mean, you know, but most of them don't. Most of the people who come there have been homosexual and have sort of outgrown it. They're not active homosexuals. And what the point is that the people who are running it are trying very hard to help this group of sort of outlying people, you know, these out of the ordinary people. So they have a lot of sympathy for others. They have a lot of caring capacity, put it that way. So I like it. I like that. They manifest a caring capacity. The people who work there, not the people who come there. But some of the people who come there are okay. Mostly they're just old,
Do you have any
frightened people.
Yeah, so you know, do you have any meaningful friendships now?
No. There's one girl upstate that I care about, but Ariel doesn't like her.
Who is that?
Her name is Christine, but Ariel doesn't like her for some reason.
What do you like about her?
I like her because she's a caring girl. Because she has that capacity. She's not even quite aware of, I mean, she's very limited in some ways. You know, she doesn't quite know where she's coming from. But she's coming from a good place. She has a good quality. So I like her. But that's all. Most of the people up there are very self-centered, limited people. I mean, most of them are not evil, but they're not particularly good either. They're just, you know, trying to survive. They don't know. They don't know what it's all about. Most of them, and they have a tendency to be a little greedy.
I think we should probably wind up here. Unless there's any particularly urgent thing you want to just add at the end, or
Yeah, I just want to add that what I said about America is not about America. It's about a tendency in American life to emphasize exploitation of other people as kind of a clever way to function. And unfortunately, it's almost promoted in some quarters as being a clever way to function. That's all. It's not about America, because America contains a lot of things. It's a big, big place. And as I say, most people are basically good. But there's just an amazing amount of confusion and difficulty. So, and as far as the events that I narrated about my history, some of them I got a little bit out of order about what I did after I went to college and then went to Europe. Then I came back. I got those a little bit out of order.
What's the correct order?
hang on, sorry,